Hi, it's Dr. Lori. We're out thrift store shopping. Can you pick the most valuable? So all of these objects you can find at a thrift store, or you're cleaning out your basement or your storage locker, whatever it is, but most of the time you can find these pieces in your general thrift store when you're shopping. I want you to know what to look for. So I'm going to go through all different types of objects, just like you would when you were at, a Salvation Army or a Goodwill or a thrift store anywhere, and go through them so you can find out what they're really worth, what people actually pay for them based on actual sales records where a similar piece is sold. So I'm going to start right here with my favorite thing, cheese. Do you like cheese? I love cheese. Cheese, chocolate, bread, that's it. I wouldn't need anything else. Wine, I'd need wine. Anyway, so this is a cheese server, right? A cheese plate, a cheese platter. They usually call it a cheese server. They're very popular in the Victorian era, late 19th century, and then in the early 20th to the mid 20th century, you start to see them more and more. Usually made of ceramic, a porcelain, or a semi-vitreous porcelain, which is, similar to porcelain, but of a different quality level when you see those words semi-vitreous porcelain or semi-porcelain. So look for that. But basically, this cheese server is a wonderful example, and it's collected for its color and for its design, the butterflies and such, and the gilding. So the gilding is that gold leaf that actually is applied on the top, in this case, of the handle. And the handle would come up, right? And then you would basically see the big block or hunk of cheese, right? About Dr. Lori sized cheese, a lot of cheese. Anyway, so basically what you're looking at there is the flat plate with an indentation so that cover of the cheese serving plate can actually be held. This one dates to the early years of the 20th century, and it's in very good condition with only some losses from the gilding. Now, while that will impact value when you see a loss in the gilding like that, because it was gilded and most of it is still there, you're still in pretty good value level. Always look at the bottom, look for bright white clay. Always look for the identifier mark, right? That's going to be on the bottom. But what if there isn't an identifier mark? Then what do you do? So that's why I want you to look for bright white clay of a particular color. If you see a grayish clay, right? If you see a clay that's more off-white, ochre, eggshell, any of those types of colors, right? You want to be careful of that. And I'll give you an example from here on my table. This particular type of ceramic clay here is a little bit more on the gray side. It's not really bright white. So the non-bright white is usually not as high quality. So be aware of that. And I've told you that before. All right, this particular cheese server, early years of the 20th century, retail value based on a sales record where similar pieces sold, $150. So that's what you're looking for. You're not going to have to spend $150 for it at the thrift store, which is what's great about this. I'm going to teach you what to buy and what you can flip online or in other avenues, other venues, so you can, in fact, right, make some money. That's what I want you to be able to do, so you can identify it properly and then flip it for cash in your pocket. The next one is a 1970s piece. I don't know if you had a 1970s kitchen, but I grew up in a 1970s kitchen, and this particular piece could have been on my mom's, of course, countertop. And the countertop was Formica. I don't know if your countertop was Formica. It wasn't, ooh, it's granite. Oh, it's quartz. Oh, it's this. It was Formica in the 1970s. And it's very, very durable. So this particular piece is called avocado green. In the 1970s, during a time period of recession or economic downturn, we were waiting, of course, in gas lines for gasoline and such. I was a wee little tot, of course. Anyway, this particular piece could have been on a regular person's everyday countertop in the kitchen. Now, these are very, very popular even today. The color scheme relates to that economic downturn. If it's a muted color, right, you usually see that is not a time of great prosperity. In a time of great prosperity, you have bright colors. This is not a bright color. This is a 1970s design, and there were three very typical popular designs then. Those three designs were, in fact, avocado green, copper tone, and then a sunshine kind of color, a color that was a yellow or a goldenrod color. All muted colors, not bright, not intensity of color. So when you're looking at design, this will teach you a lot about these particular types of colors. This particular piece is, of course, a can opener. It's an electric can opener. That was seen as a great innovation in the 1970s, of course. An electric can opener that you would plug into the wall. Make sure that if you are looking at vintage pieces and you see the plug, that you don't have any breaks in the plug. And don't wrap up those plugs, because those little wires inside can actually deteriorate, break down, and cause a fire. So make sure that the plug is okay. If those of you are saying, well, I don't know if I want to sell this with a deteriorated plug or a damaged plug, rewiring it will not impact value. Keep the old plug, rewire it with a new plug or a new, plug, and then you'll be okay. But don't get rid of the old plug if you're going to rewire something for safety, if you want to use that, for example. So this particular piece, if you're picking the most valuable, it's worth $40 from the 1970s. This next piece is a piece of Trifari costume jewelry, and Trifari is what's important. The brand name on costume jewelry is very important. The Coros, the Trifaris, the Maravellas, of course, Napier, the Sarah Coventrys, the Avons. There's a whole huge long list of them that I talk about. These particular brand names in costume jewelry will increase and impact value. Trifari is a well-known name, and there are different marks for Trifari. So you might see the crown mark with the capital T. You might see the copyright sign with Trifari. All different types of Trifari marks help you to date those pieces in the decades of the early 1900s. Okay, this is a piece of costume jewelry. It's gold tone. Notice the workmanship on a Trifari piece of costume jewelry. And how do you identify the workmanship? Turn it over and look at the back. See if it is consistent in terms of the setting. See how the pin is made. Is the pin a barrel pin, or is the pin a flip pin, basically a circle that will latch on for security of the pin? I also want you to think about, when you look at it, look at the quality when they're actually making each individual leaf. You can see the veins of the leaves that are actually even done. Attention to detail in costume jewelry will impact value in costume jewelry. Attention to detail in costume jewelry will impact value. So when you're looking at this piece, yes, they are faux pearls of different types and different sizes, a little bit different, but basically they are costume and they are fake or faux pearls with, of course, that costume or gold tone setting. It's a very beautiful piece, really wonderful condition, and value on it about $55 if you were to buy it retail, right? Now, in an environment like the thrift store, right, if you put all the pins together for $55, you could probably get a pretty good haul of very valuable pieces if you want to invest about $50 at that thrift store for all these different pieces. But look first for that name and get the loop. For goodness sake, get the loop. The magnification loop, right? 10 times or 30 times. We sell them, of course, on our website too, but this is really important. So remember to get the loop. It is worth the investment, and it's a small investment, because if you don't use the loop, you're not going to see it, and then you might miss something of value. The marks mean a lot when it comes to costume jewelry. Now, if you're going to pick the most valuable, would you pick this? I'm a wine drinker. I like wine. So I like red better than white. I just happen to like red better than white. I have my, of course, excuses that I could drink more red because, of course, you know, it's good for your body. It's good for your health, they say. I don't know. I'm not that kind of doctor, so I don't know. But this is a locked decanter. So this particular type of decanter was oftentimes used in sailing vessels, and it was oftentimes used, of course, in different types of environments where you would need to have a key to actually unlock it, because spirits, wine, spirits, liquors, all those types of things were expensive, and of course we wanted to monitor how much we drank. You'll notice that this has a lock on the side, and then that lock actually holds the stopper down. It is a clear glass, of course, decanter and stopper. And remember, these decanters can be very valuable. You'd be surprised at how much value there are in these decanters. So they can be in wonderful, wonderful condition, and make sure that the stopper is the correct stopper. Most of the time the stoppers are right with them. Sometimes there's a little crack here and there. Don't worry so much about that if you're trying to resell a decanter. But in fact, think about the idea of just making sure that you're honest with whomever you are trying to sell something to. Make sure that you are telling them, oh, there's a little crack or there's a little chip in the decanter stopper. So Couple things about this piece. It's silver plated. It's not sterling, right? This portion that, of course, is holding it together with the locking mechanism. You gotta have the key to have value, right? If you don't have the key, the whole operation basically isn't worth as much, right? So value on this, the decanter, the stopper with the locking mechanism in silver plate with the clear glass, $400 retail. Okay, so then there's this. It's a pair of costume jewelry earrings. Each one of those particular stones, quote unquote, are not real, naturally developed stones. They are glass of a color, and they're different colors placed together. So what makes this of interest at all? Well, costume jewelry makes this type, which is an unmarked pair of earrings. What makes this important in this particular type is, in fact, the way in which these costume jewelry earrings are, in fact, designed. So the placement of each one of those glass pieces, right, each one of those faux stones, if you will, where they're placed, and the design element is where the value really is. Right? If you turn it over, as I've talked about with costume jewelry before, you want to look for the encasing or the setting of these particular faux stones. So how they're set is going to be important, right? Whether or not they're all individual little pieces of metal, or if it's one piece of metal and the stones are just placed in, and then you just push the prongs onto each stone. So the prongs are a telltale sign. If you look at the prongs on a piece of costume jewelry and they're an angle, for example, they make a point, right? Usually those are not the highest quality. So if you look for the point on them, and if you have a pretty large stone and you only have 4 prongs, they're usually lower quality than those that have more than 4 prongs. Okay, so there's a lot of things to look at with costume jewelry, and just because something's unmarked doesn't mean it's not valuable. But those markings that we talked about, like Trifari and Coro and others, are going to be more valuable than this particular pair. This pair, and if you don't see a pair, right? A lot of people like just one earring, and a lot of people wear one earring. That's great. But with costume jewelry, you really want to have the pair. That will increase value a little bit. This unmarked set or this unmarked pair of costume jewelry from the 1950s, 1960s, about $40 retail. And then there's the fan, right? So the fans are really wonderful. I think they're beautiful objects of design. I think they're great objects that you can see with respect to color. I think there's a lot of things that are going on with fans that are pretty interesting, right? So now this particular fan is a pretty good example. So notice the blades that kind of look like propellers on a ship, right? And notice this, which is the concentric circles. The concentric circles help to date these fans, right? So these are mid-20th century. Some of the fans that have sort of this curved line that actually makes it look like it's wind blowing. It's kind of, these are not concentric circles, they're kind of little lines like that. And a plate in the middle for the manufacturer, might be Westinghouse or somebody else, is going to be relatively important. The other thing about this fan has color for its time period. Very typical of the 40s, 50s, 60s in this teal color. But what you're also going to see in some of them, some of the older ones are going to be all black, and they're going to have different aspects. So they give you this so you don't put your hand in here while it's going, right? And hurt yourself. But basically what I want you to think about with the fans is, are they in working condition, right? Do they have a particular color scheme or design element that will increase value for you? So that's the other thing you want to think about. Value on that particular fan that you're looking at now, $65. So those old fans are very popular with interior decorators and folks who like vintage design, thrift store shoppers who say, I'm going to decorate my house with, of course, thrift store ideas. I talk about this all the time. People will interview me and ask me, Dr. Lori, how do I decorate with thrift store finds? And this is one of the most popular things happening in home design today. So that fan's worth $65. And then there's this if you want to decorate with really cool vintage stuff and unusual stuff. This particular piece is called a button picture. You've probably seen those pictures where broken pieces of jewelry are put together in a frame, right, on a backboard, and you basically make a picture out of it. They're very popular at holiday time, like at Christmas time. But this is a button picture, and they were popular usually at Easter and into the summer months. People would make these as a craft. So they would take old buttons of bright colors and they would place them together and they'd make a picture like a landscape. Pocketbook and purse designers actually in the 1960s took this on and started to do this with beadwork and with actual buttons on purses. So it was first, in fact, something to decorate the walls for usually newlyweds or people who didn't have a lot of money to have an oil painting on the wall. They decided to have a button picture. So it's a craft and it's also a work of art. This particular button picture is a really good example. Now, some people would say, oh, okay, well, what about the buttons? Aren't the buttons valuable? The buttons are valuable. In this particular case, you're not basically discerning each button. You're not saying, oh, there's a $3 button, there's a $5 button, there's a $30 button. Instead, what you're doing is you're saying, this is using buttons as a material, right, for my craft project. The button picture dates to the middle years of the 20th century. It's really, really cool. And the frame is not all that valuable. Most of the value in the buttons and in, of course, the craftsmanship. Value on the button picture, $100. The ship in the bottle, which everybody knows about. Oh, it's a ship in a bottle. How did they get the ship in the bottle? How did they do it? And that age-old question. So as long as you have a ship in the bottle where you can tell that they have not cut off one side, the bottom of the bottle, right? Shoved the ship in one piece, and then of course reattached, heated up the glass, reattached it or fused the glass back together. As long as you really have a ship in the bottle that was put together through, again, the opening of the bottle, and you can tell that by how much glue is on each of the pieces of the ship, right? And also you can tell, of course, by how large that opening is. But ships in bottles go all the way back to the great seafaring golden age of piracy of the 1650s and even before that. So ships in bottles are very popular and still quite collectible with folks all over the world, whether it's in seafaring areas or not. The ship in the bottle here dates to the latter part of the 19th century, the late 1800s, and value on it is $180. So you've got all these different objects, all these different bits of information, and if you're in the thrift store and you're shopping, you want to make sure that you are choosing those objects that you will love in your home design and treasure forever, or you decide that you can make some money on learning more from my videos and, of course, flipping them. So I'm Dr. Lori. Did you pick the most valuable? I'll help you do it every time. Thanks for watching.